But we've had a lot of help from the March Australia people here today in helping to provide a speaking system or that kind of thing. And all the other people behind the scenes who helped put this together, all the regional groups such as the Benelong for Refugees, the Blue Mountains for Refugees, who've got the train down today, the Sutherland for Refugees have been campaigning in Morrison's home turf very consistently over the last few months. But our first speaker today is Sister Susan Connelly. She's an assistant of St Joseph, and I've been around long enough to know that Sister Susan spoke on a regular occurrence during the Howard years against the outrages being dished out to asylum seekers 10 years ago. She now does a lot of work with the situation in East Timor, and she remains passionate about the issue of refugees and asylum seekers. So Susan.
And apply them very liberally to ourselves in this generation, putting ourselves into a terrific light. But what we say about ourselves is not necessarily true. It's what we do that counts. In the coming few years, some Australians will conjure up images of all that was best in the Anzac tradition, and by some mental gymnastic imagine that the brave audacity of young men 100 years ago somehow describes the Australian character today. If it is possible to describe an Australian identity, it is not enough to look at the past. We have to look at the present. How Australians are acting now is the indicator of what sort of people live here. Cruelty is the word most often used regarding asylum seekers by the Australian Catholic bishops in a recent statement. Cruelty. Cruelty is an exercise of power. Mice aren't cruel to lions. Australia's treatment of asylum seekers across the board is simply cruel. It is national bullying. Now, friends, we need to think very carefully about this. Each person here is so important, and our actions and attitudes have far-reaching effects. While we will oppose with might and main the way refugees are treated, we cannot afford to copy the viciousness underlying present asylum seekers' policies by being cruel ourselves. Personal attacks merely indicate that the erosion of values is well underway. I do think, however, that well-chosen ridicule, satire and cartoonery are essential, but not hateful or demeaning insults. These do no good. They do no good, and as such they are counterproductive in the fight for justice. Australia is becoming one of the most insular and calculating nations on earth. And where does that come from? Fear. Don't talk to me about Australian courage. We are a fearful people. The bishops mention our fear of the outsider and the other. They mention our latent racism. They name the dehumanisation of the whole asylum seeker process and the shame it brings on our country. They talk of the dark forces which make these policies possible. Now, they're not talking here about some Hogwarts escapist trivia. This is about the human heart, the Australian heart, which can even dress up cruelty as some sort of national imperative. How wonderful it would be if we had strong leaders who would not calculate everything according to getting the votes, but would actually lead. I never thought that I would have to agree that my nation is cruel. This is not what we say about ourselves. but it is what we are doing. Now, John Birmingham's article in the Sydney Morning Herald today uses the excellent phrase, the theatre of politics. That's what it is. Actors dealing in images and one-liners whose overriding aim is to get the same role next time round. The dialogue is all jargon. Team Australia going forward, stopping the boats 24/7, developing Cambodia by donating them some refugees, divide and conquer. No humanity at all, just cruelty. The police and special forces were recently cast as the Keystone Cops. Those government scriptwriters and publicists, notably Alan Jones and Ray Hadley, who vie for top spot in the angertainment industry, have they mentioned that the recent raids ended up with one person charged and a plastic sword? Oh no, you're right. That would make the whole thing look like the farce that it is. The demonisation of asylum seekers is all of one piece with the victimisation of our Muslims. We have to have enemies somewhere. Fear of the other makes us cling to daddy, because that's how we'll be safe and secure, even though Credlin Wardrobes Incorporated mucked the costuming up with those little red togs. Of course, it is the business of government to protect the people, and we expect them to do that. But I am far more afraid of rushed legislation which gives governments and intelligence agencies increased powers and diminishes the ability of the judiciary and the media to scrutinise the exercise of those powers. Let us not forget those locked up in Australia who have been found to be genuine refugees but who are denied release because of some ASIO accusation. They cannot answer the accusation because they haven't been told what it is, and neither has anybody else. And where are we? Where are you and I in this theatre of politics? When certain members and senators in Parliament recently called for the banning of the burqa, there was, I quote the newspaper, an extraordinary public backlash. The only way the government, yes, good on us. The only way the government will experience a backlash about refugees is if we give them the experience. Friends, we must invade the stage. We must be relentless in ringing, writing and meeting them. Go to the first speeches of the ministers and find the values that they said were theirs. Call them to account on those values. They sought the office, they wrote the speeches, they should be held accountable. If you get a rude reply, as I did from one of our esteemed senators, don't repay in kind. Don't victimise the victimisers. We have truth and goodness on our side as we are upholding the human dignity of refugees. We don't have to descend to the level of fear-driven insult. Actually, dear friends, I know from my own personal experience it is easier to be rude and nasty. But that's not the way of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King, Oscar Romero or Desmond Tutu or anybody else who's had a lasting influence for good. And it certainly wasn't the way of Jesus Christ, although he sure knew how to call out a hypocrite when he saw one. My dear fellow Australians, no one is going to live our values for us. We have to live those values. We've got to do the living. We have to steady our own personal ship despite all the immense amount of issues that are facing us. We have to respond to our deepest selves and work together for the common good. We could become a chorus in this theatre that demands that offshore processing must end, that Australia must assist with the huge worldwide refugee problem by taking all of those who come to us, regardless of how they get here, and that we do not insult struggling nations like Cambodia by bribing them to take our refugees. Once again, it is the people of Australia, you and me and everybody else, who has to take the lead. Thank you.